You're listening to episode 79 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, we're chatting with Camille Kinzler about how to live an alcohol-free lifestyle and create a life that you don't want to numb. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, your host as always, and we have an episode for you today that I feel like some of us might need after the year we've had in 2020. Today's guest is Camille Kinzler, and Camille helps the high-achieving social overdrinker learn how to de-stress, relax, and connect without instinctively reaching for her go-to cocktail by creating a life she doesn't want to numb. She is an alcohol-free lifestyle and habits expert with a master's degree in science, and she's a physician assistant who is passionate about helping women create the life that they choose through her C.O.Z.Y method. She specializes in helping women explore whether alcohol is helping them manifest the life they desire. In the 21st century, the outdated question, "Do I have a drinking problem?" has been replaced with, "Is alcohol serving me?" 90% of people who drink do not identify as an alcoholic. They're gray area drinkers, and for some, drinking has become a habit that is hard to break. She intimately understands how bad habits can prevent us from living the life that we dream about and has personally been on this self-discovery journey for over 4 years. Through one-on-one and small group coaching, Camille guides women in 100-day explorations around their vices using her signature C.O.Z.Y method. This isn't about quitting your vices cold turkey, it's about expanding your awareness and not limiting it. In addition to her private coaching practice, Camille is a physician assistant who specializes in root cause medicine. She has worked in urgent care and family practice for over 11 years, and she draws on her medical education as well as her training as a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and certified life and recovery coach to help women discover the root cause of their habits. She ultimately helps women create a life that they don't want to numb. So like I said, this episode I think is relevant for a lot of people who maybe started to use alcohol as a bit more of a numbing type experience than they might have before, because 2020, let's face it, was a year that a lot of us kind of wanted to numb out. So I feel like this is super relevant for so many of us who want to live a purpose-driven life, but feel like alcohol might be getting in the way of really fully expressing that full purpose. And it was a really great conversation with Camille where we discuss why women struggle with alcohol and what we can do to use alcohol in a healthy way that doesn't limit our potential as women. So without further ado, here is Camille Kinzler. All right, everyone. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Camille Kinzler. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Camille.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our audience who has not had the chance to meet you yet, I would love if you could just share your story about how you got into helping women with alcohol challenges and numbing challenges, and why did you actually move away from an 11-year career in medicine to pursue coaching in that area?
Oh, I love telling my story around this. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to. So I actually had a 2-decade drinking career, so a relationship with alcohol that changed over the years. When I was in college, it was all around drinking with the big boys. And then when I was a professional woman, started having happy hours with friends. And then as I changed and developed and started having children, I ended up bringing alcohol into the home where I would have that glass of wine while making dinner. And then that turned into where I was drinking wine 4 times a week. And it went from just a glass of wine to half a bottle of wine to 3 glasses of wine. And every time that I would try to change my habit around it, I would make it 3 or 4 days and then get bored or actually have a really good day and want to celebrate with some wine, or have a really stressful day at work and then reach for a glass of wine. And I was so frustrated that I started wondering if I had a problem with alcohol, if I was an alcoholic, and even looked into potentially going to AA meetings that didn't really work with having children and working full time. And so then I just started really doing my research about what was alcohol dependence and overuse and what is this term alcoholism. And I recognized that I didn't fit the criteria. What happened was, as I was in this really deep habit of drinking to celebrate, to punctuate my life, if you will. And there wasn't a lot of people out there at the time, 4 years ago, really talking about this idea of a gray area drinker. And a gray area drinker is somebody who isn't a teetotaler and doesn't have to drink to wake up in the morning, but it's the 80% of other people in our society that drink more than what's allotted by what's considered moderation, which is 1 glass per night for women. I know a lot of women who drink 3 glasses or a bottle of wine every few nights or even every night, which is way above the standard, but no one's really talking about that. So I wanted to create this safe haven for women to come to and say, hey, I don't have a problem with alcohol, but alcohol is a problem in my life. It's not serving me in some way. What the heck is up with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that because I feel like in our culture, you don't really have a lot of the, like you said, the gray area conversation, because it's most people, I think you could argue, are not traditional alcoholics, right? Like an alcoholic a lot of times has a true addiction, and there's a lot of issues like health issues that happen when they stop drinking, that kind of thing. Whereas our society, I feel like a lot of that drinking to excess is kind of just considered normal. Or, I mean, especially in the last year with the pandemic and everything, it's probably something that's even gotten a lot worse. And it's not that somebody couldn't stop or that they would need some kind of medical intervention to help them stop. It's just, it's part of their life in a way that isn't really serving them. And I think that's probably a lot more common than what we would even realize.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to look at is it's not to ask yourself if you have a problem with drinking. It's, is alcohol serving me in my life? Is it allowing me to wake up and be energized and ready to be productive and ready to start my day, to be available for my kids in a different way? Or is it something that I'm just exhausted? I'm tired. And that's really what happened to me at the very end is I was exhausted. And I would try all the things, green juices and 30-day cleanses and Whole30 and meditations and yoga, all the things in order to try not to drink it in the evenings. And again, I wasn't drinking every night, but it was something that I knew wasn't serving me. But I tried everything else other than just removing alcohol and keeping everything else the same.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so important too with the pandemic and how we've brought it in our house, and it's a way for us to connect in a different way. Maybe we're lonely if we live alone, or Zoom happy hours. We still have that really big social aspect to it. And the thing is with alcohol is that it's an addictive substance. So really, the more that you drink, the more you'll want to drink. It's just the way that the chemical is designed. And so I love to remind people that it's not your fault. It's just not. We started drinking because it was fun, or we started drinking because it was serving a purpose in our lives. And then it just gets to a point where we need it in a different way or crave it in a different way, or becomes part of our habituation and our rituals.
Mm-hmm. So why do you feel so many women, especially in our culture, we're talking about American culture here. Why do so many women struggle with drinking alcohol beyond what the moderation guidelines are?
Again, a piece of that is the habituation of it. So we are creatures of habit. Every single thing that we do is a habit, and it's hard to break habits. It's really hard to make and break habits. I like to ask people, do you think it's harder to quit drinking or to change your diet? And everyone says, oh, of course, to quit drinking. And then I said, well, how's that lifestyle diet change treating you?
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, yeah, I only make it 6 months. And then I'm back into my old patterns. We're creatures of habit. And so when we try to change our drinking habits, then what happens is that we really don't take into consideration when we're changing our food habits or starting an exercise routine. We expect it just to not happen. And so we really have to be intentional with the way that we look at the way our habits are created, and then be intentional about trying to set ourselves up for success in that way. And then the other part of that question was,
I was just curious if there was any specific reasons why you feel women in particular struggle.
yeah, and I think that there's this idea of perfectionism within women as well. And we are so expected by society, but also by ourselves, to do everything. And we can't do everything. And we have to really take responsibility and learn how to slow down. Because if we start the day and we are going at, full speed, and we do that 8 hours, by the end of the day, we're not making good habits. We're not making good habits about our food. We're not making good habits about drinking. And so I think that we have to recognize as women that the perfectionism really needs to be set aside in order for us to slow down and really take care of ourselves throughout the day. So I think that's a big piece. I think women as moms, they particularly don't have that time to be by themselves. And so it's the way to delineate my time and the time with my kids is in the evening. I have heard this so many times, and I used to say it too, is that alcohol became my best friend in a way. It was that thing that was sort of always there. And it was what really allowed me, before I recognized it was not helping me in this way, but relax and connect with my husband. My husband and I would drink together. So I think there's a big piece of that, of being overworked and then really not having that time to kind of care for ourselves and honor ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like, especially, I've just noticed in my own life since the pandemic started, because so much of what we would normally do for enjoyment and relaxation and social time and everything has been limited / for a long time, it was completely not even available. It was almost like, well, I guess we'll just have some wine together, or have a cocktail or something. And it was almost like that felt like it was the only thing we could even do. And so now obviously things are more open than they were a year ago. But I do think that sometimes those habits, they get formed in a certain circumstance. And then when that circumstance changes, it's like, well, now this is a thing that we do, right? So it is something that I know for sure in my life, a lot of times I am using it as okay, the day's over. It is like a delineator. It's almost like, all right, I'm not working anymore, and I'm going to have the glass of wine. And the glass of wine is like the signifier that I'm done working today. And it's interesting because it's in theory, you wouldn't need that. You don't have to have that to actually say I'm done with work for the day. But I can see how it must be your brain just craves to have that clear transition to be able to really put the work down and to be able to relax and everything. And so I wonder, did you have that same experience, or do some of your clients have that same experience?
Yeah, I always like to talk about the red zone versus the green zone. So red zone regulation is basically, if it's on a scale from 0 to 10, 10 is when we're super angry and we're screaming and we're just hot. That's when our stress response or a stress level is so high. And then 1 at the other end of the spectrum is in the green, where we're feeling really loving and connected. And what usually happens throughout the day is that we're usually around an 8 most of the day. And then what we're just trying to do, again, it's not our fault, it's our physiology. At the end of the day, we're trying to get out of that stress response and get back into the green response, because we as humans can't live in that stress response. It causes illness. And so what we do is just grab for the thing that's going to be the quickest to get us back to that green zone response. So it's a little touches a little bit on what we just talked about it's our responsibility to slow down throughout the day. And it's so something like a tip that I can give you guys is to set your timer for every couple of hours and just have it say, what zone are you in right now? Are you feeling that you're around a 7? And what can you do? It's super simple. Take a couple of deep breaths, and that should get you down into the yellow, if not into the green. And if we do that more periodically throughout the day, then when you get to the 5 o'clock time, then you're not feeling like physiologically that you have to rush into that green zone, that you can ease into it a little bit more, where the idea of having a cup of tea actually works. Because come on, if you're like coming in hot at 5 p.m., the idea of just having a glass of tea does not make a lot of sense. Like you're like, okay, let's drink the tea and then have the glass of wine.
Throw a little whiskey in the tea or something, right?
Yeah, right. Hot toddy.
Mm-hmm. And I know before we started recording, we were kind of having a little bit of a conversation around habits and how a lot of people, when they try to change their habits, they're really just coming at it from like a cold turkey. Like, I'm just going to change the habit. And that's the only thing that they focus on. So why is that not effective? And is there a different way to approach habit change specifically with alcohol?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just say that I'm not going to drink alcohol tonight, I'm not going to pick up wine from the grocery store or the bottle shop on my way home, then what we're doing is we're coming into this environment that we're used to opening up a bottle of wine for. So we start doing the exact same routine that we always do. We open the back door, we put all of our stuff away, we start prepping dinner, and then we're just like, I desperately want a glass of wine. Then we start feeling guilty and bad, like, do I have a problem? Is something wrong with me? We might even get into our car and go and get wine. And so what's so important is to really switch up that routine for the first week or two. It takes way longer to make and break a habit than 21 days, but usually the first 7 days is kind of the hardest when you are creating new habits and breaking bad ones. So it would be that you actually don't come home at 5 o'clock, or since a lot of us are home, that when we leave our home office, that we go immediately for a walk. We just switch things up. If you're a mom, what I did for the first month is I would throw my kids in the stroller, this is when they were younger, and take them on a walk at 5 o'clock and feed them peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or give them a bath when it would usually be dinner time, and let them eat popsicles in the bathtub. Our kids love that kind of stuff. They're just like, Mom is so cool and being so fun and crazy. When really it's just like, it helps prevent us from white knuckling it. Why do we need to white knuckle it when we can just switch around our environment a little bit?
Mm-hmm. And then we had also been talking a little bit about this concept of the identity and belief-based behavior change. So can you speak a little to that and how the beliefs might play a role in somebody's habits with alcohol?
Yeah, this is so big. So I quit drinking 4 years ago. In the last couple of years, I have been able to have a glass of wine when I feel like it or want it. And that's truly believed. I don't see myself as a drinker before. Now, prior to that, I did. It was part of my identity. I was the cool mom or cool, wife that could drink beer and, hang out on the sailboat, right? I was the mom with the glass of wine. I was the best friend who could go and have dinner and cocktails with you. I was the fun girl, right? And so the idea of removing that was like removing this big piece of my identity. And I also felt like other people saw that as a piece of my identity of being the fun one, right? So what happens so much is we change this habit. We remove alcohol for 21 days, whatever it may be. And then we're left with, oh my gosh, but then who am I? And so we easily then gravitate back towards drinking because it makes us feel comfortable. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing, I'm assuming, with food, right? It's like if you have this image of being the woman who eats fast food and then you remove it, but you still have that identity of the person who eats fast food, then more than likely it's going to be a lot easier for you to go back to those habits.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're really looking at changing our habit, I have this method, which is called the C.O.Z.Y method, where C is really around, consistency, where we're looking at your consistency of habits, not only behaviors, but the way that your emotional habits and the way that you think. So behaviors and thoughts and emotions are all habits. And then we have this, the O stands for ownership. So really taking ownership of self-regulation, of the way that we feel and our stress response, and take ownership for where we are in our lives. And the Z portion is really where we zoom out and look at where we want to be in 4 months and 1 year. And then the Y is really, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. So looking at boundaries. And what I see so much is that if you have one aspect of it where you're changing the consistency, so you're changing your habits, but you're not doing some of the other things, like where do you want to be in 1 year? Or are you taking ownership for where you are in your life and your self-regulation? Are you creating good boundaries? Then it's so much easier to fall back into those habits. And so that Z portion of it is really looking at our identity, really zooming out and saying, who do I want to be? And then how do I make these small changes to get there? And does alcohol serve me in order to get to that person? What do I need to shed? And what part of my identity do I need to shed? Which is big work. It takes courage to do that, right? It's not like...
Well, and I can imagine something that, especially in this particular topic, could affect somebody's results or ability to be successful would be their social life. Because, and this probably comes into play with a lot of the different types of identity-based changes that people want to make. But my experience, and I don't have a lot of friends that drink, like just my circle, like we sometimes drink, but it's not, we're not going out to happy hour every weekend or something like that. But if you have friends that's the lifestyle that they're operating in, do you have any tips for how to navigate that, other than obviously like you could just like totally change your friend group, but I'm sure most people don't want to do that. So what do you do when you have friends that alcohol is a big part of your social experience?
So again, at the beginning, the very beginning, the first month or so, what I would say is that you can white knuckle it in those situations, or what you can do is just really create that month to where it feels best and most nourishing for you. You're not going to want to not go out with your friends that drink forever. You just really be gentle with yourself when you're trying to make the habit changes at first. And then more than likely what's going to happen is when you start going out with your friends that do drink, you're going to recognize that they're not as much fun after the second or third cocktail that they have. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to just naturally invite them to do other things with you, to go to lunch or go on a walk in the morning. It's a natural process. The other natural process is that it's likely that some friends will fall away. And that's, again, part of changing and part of growing and evolving is that some friends serve us, just like some of our habits serve us and don't. Some of our friends serve us and don't. And so I had this with my husband, because my husband and I were married for 10 years before we had kids. We traveled, we drank, we celebrated. We were professional people in the world, right? So we would punctuate our lives with drinking. So I was very concerned that if I removed alcohol, how are we going to connect? And at that point, I really understood that I had to choose myself and I had to trust that it would just work out. Now, he ended up watching me in my evolution with not drinking and who I was becoming. He ended up he stopped drinking too. And that's where we are. We're like this couple who doesn't drink anymore. But I had to trust that it would all fall into place. And I know that that's really hard to do at the beginning, again, because we're shedding an identity, and that can be scary.
Yeah. Well, especially in a marriage, it's like, what is the marriage going to be like if so much of your connection time centers around alcohol? And obviously if the relationship is healthy, the alcohol shouldn't be necessary. But I think there is a lot of that fear of the unknown of what's going to happen if we take that out, which I would imagine a lot of women or people in general end up just kind of staying stuck because they're afraid of how their core relationships are going to change if they were to stop drinking. But that's great that you had that experience with your husband where you both kind of like, it sounds like you kind of went on your own path, but it ended up in the same destination, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Awesome. So I would love just to help people understand as far as why it's even worth getting rid of alcohol. Because I think it's like, when you have a little bit of a hangover or it can be expensive or any of that stuff, like there's some of those kind of surface level issues that come from drinking that I think most people are aware of. But I feel like there is probably some much deeper issues that people don't even realize alcohol is creating in their life, and specifically around living a more purposeful life, like really being engaged with life and, doing the things that you want to do and just having that empowered experience to walk through life where you're really fulfilling what you were brought to earth to do. So I'd love to talk a little bit about how alcohol could actually be getting in the way of women living their purpose.
Yeah, I love that. A couple of things that kind of came through when you asked that. One, specifically about women living their purpose, is I think that even with I'm a healthcare provider, I'm a, physician assistant. And so I think not talking about the effects that alcohol has on our bodies and our brain would be a miss to not do that. But one thing that 20% of people who have social anxiety disorder is because and due to drinking. So one, I just want to mention that if you feel like you're anxious or more anxious after you drink in the morning, after you drink at night, when you wake up in the morning, if you feel anxious, that you should really look at alcohol can make you feel less anxious for a short period of time, but then it rebounds with more anxiety. If you have any gut issues, and I know that this is like big part of what you do, Laura, is if you have any sort of gut issues that you really need to look at your alcohol consumption because it can increase gut permeability. And most of my patients that I've had, we have removed alcohol, it's fixed their acid reflux, it's fixed their constipation and bouts of diarrhea. It's helped with skin and bloating and really helps with weight loss. And I'm not talking about from the decrease in calories, but the inflammation, because alcohol does cause inflammation. So really just kind of, and this is talking about 2 drinks a day. So 2 drinks a day, or if you can add that up, and that's 14 drinks. So if you binge drink just on the weekends, then that can equal 14 drinks in a week. So that's big. So you need to really look at that. And I think as healthcare professionals, so important that we really get honest or I guess really build the trust to get the honest answer from our patients about how much they're drinking. And I know as a healthcare professional who felt super hypocritical for so long, it can be hard to obtain that information and to give direct advice because we're like, well, if I'm doing it, I can't tell them not to. And again, this is part of my work is really switching that paradigm and just be more truthful in all aspects as a provider and as a client or a patient. Then on the other side, when we're looking at our purpose, so let's say that we have this desire, this dream, and we're headed in that direction. But then every weekend it's Friday and we're like, well, I'm going to drink wine. And then it's Saturday and I'm going to drink wine. And then you're basically starting over every Monday. And actually, then it's maybe every Tuesday. And then you have to get the wheels turning again. You have to just mentally, that mental fog has to clear for us to then feel like we're on our direct path and we feel inspired again. And then what happens? Friday we drink and it's fun. And then we're starting all over again. So that's a big thing. The other thing is that we don't sleep well. Even if we have a glass of wine at night, we don't actually have the reparative sleep that we need. And so we're going to be more tired in the morning, even if we recognize it as a hangover or not. So then, just if we want to get more metaphysical, it's like a low vibration substance. Alcohol doesn't actually add anything to our lives, like eating more healthy foods can increase our vibration and energy, and alcohol doesn't. And so we're really kind of cutting off that relation to spirit. And that is so important when we're really trying to figure out what our purpose is. And then the other thing is that if we can really lean into these uncomfortable moments where we want to have a drink or we have a craving and we get to the other side, that builds confidence. And that allows us to begin to trust ourselves more. And really, when we can trust ourselves more, we can trust other people. And then if you really want to just look at that and take it one step further, that leaves a bigger legacy for our children and our grandchildren and just the world and universal consciousness if we can trust ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I spend a decent amount of time with some entrepreneurs that, they're running. I mean, I don't run a multi-million-dollar business, but some of my friends do. And it's just interesting to see, even at events where there's an open bar, you could have as much alcohol as you wanted. A lot of them either don't drink at all, or maybe they have one drink and then they're done. And it's an interesting experience, especially coming from other social groups, you mentioned college and that kind of thing. And the people that I interacted with that were from my college days, it was just a totally different attitude towards alcohol, where I feel like the typical American culture is, oh yeah, go out drinking and it doesn't matter how much you have. And even if you feel like crap the next day, that's just normal. And Sundays you have to just sleep it off or whatever. But then you get into these communities of people that are they're so focused on personal development so that their businesses can grow. And it's just interesting to see their relationship with alcohol and how it's different. And again, it's not that we're saying nobody drinks at all and they don't touch alcohol and it's you never, even have a sip or whatever. But it's a very different experience where I think there's certain groups that I used to spend time with that if you were at an open bar, you'd be let's get as much as we can. It's free alcohol or whatever. Whereas this particular group, again, it was just yeah, have a drink, be social or whatever, but you don't need to be getting drunk because there's no benefit to it. So it's just interesting to see the different ways that people approach alcohol. And again, it's not to say that somebody has to totally never touch it again to have a healthy relationship with it. It's just, I feel like we do have this culture in our society that getting even just tipsy or getting a little bit drunk is the goal when drinking, as opposed to just kind of having one drink and, enjoying it and then being done and not having to actually be drunk as part of the experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I mentioned over the past couple of years, I've had a drink here and there. And every time I do, I'm oh, why did I do that? Because I've created these boundaries around the only time I will ever have a drink is if I'm really happy. That's it. And then every time that I'm happy and I have a drink, then I'm oh man, it took away that high, that natural high that I've learned how to create on my own. And so I think that there's a piece of that too, is when we get to know ourselves so well. And of course, I mean, we still have bad days and all of that's, that's human nature, but I definitely have more good days, meaning naturally high, happy days. And so every time that I do have even a few sips, I'm man, this is bringing me down from that state that I was in. And learning how to change your state is such a superpower that we can do as human beings. And so I really encourage everybody to learn how to do that. And changing state means changing your emotion.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, and this is maybe more of a what's your opinion kind of question, but do you believe that women can still enjoy alcohol on a, moderation basis? I'd put moderation in air quotes, whatever the official definition of moderation is. Do you believe that they can still enjoy alcohol and have a healthy and empowered life?
Do I think that this is a really interesting question? So do I think if a woman is only having one drink per day can still have an empowering life? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean, I guess obviously I feel my thinking is, okay, is following those moderation guidelines, is that still potentially excessive alcohol? And would the optimal state be no alcohol? I'm just curious what your opinion is about that.
So it's really interesting because it's not even my personal opinion. It's coming out that even one drink per day for women and two drinks per day for men is too much. That it increases for women our rate of breast cancer. And it's something that if you go onto breastcancer.org, and look up alcohol, you'll read the statistics right there. And so they're saying that one drink per day is too much. Now, what I always like to do is I'm not here to tell anybody how to live your life. You just have to practice and see if it's something that really elevates your life or not. So, if you're drinking in moderation, what I would, and you're just like, I wonder if I could expedite my potential, then try to go 100 days without drinking. Now, I say 100 days more than 21 days because it takes longer for us to really build those new neural networks, even up to a year to really change. I like to look at it like a cross country skier. And so when you cross country ski, you want to go around the lake, which already has the divots in there. It makes it a lot easier than forging your own path, but it takes a long time for us to really lay those neural networks, those paths, in order to make that an easier habituation or easier pattern. But anyway, so do it longer than 21 days. I recommend 100 days because that's when you really get into new habits and behaviors. It's when you're really open up to the world in a different way. And if you're drinking one drink per day, I could almost bet that you would see changes in your life. Decreased inflammation, more energy, more connection, more confidence.
Yeah, it's interesting that the guidelines around the one drink per day, it's like I think about that for myself. I'm like, I feel like I wouldn't feel good if I was having alcohol every single day, and I just wonder how many people they assume, oh, it's healthy. And I feel like it used to be kind of recommended as like a health practice to have a glass of wine every day and get the resveratrol and that kind of thing. And not to say, again, it's not, I don't think either of us are trying to say that you should never drink and that drinking's terrible and nobody should do it and there's no reason that you would ever do it. It's just kind of like, at what point is it really tipping over into causing harm? And again, it could be subtle, right? Like it's maybe you're just a little bit more tired the next day, but then if that compounds over time and you're always a little bit tired, is that how you want to live your whole life, right? Like just being a little bit tired all the time.
Yeah. The fun thing about life and living life is we get to experiment. We get to see what helps and what works in our life and what doesn't. Now, what society has taught us, not only from just advertising, but even social media with our friends celebrating with wine, is that wine is fun, that wine helps us connect, helps us laugh and let loose. And so what we're doing is we're fighting against that. And so again, it takes bravery and courage to really go against the grain. And we can feel like that we're an outcast in a way. So it takes a little bit of effort to make these changes just to experiment with. So always, join a group of other women who are doing it, and an exploratory sort of adventure can make it really a lot more fun. And then you can wake up with each other every day and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much society pushes alcohol on us. If you're in Whole Foods and you're in the checkout, they have the little bottles, the cans of rosé.
Oh, really? I haven't been to a Whole Foods in so long, so I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and it's just, it's crazy how much it's pushed on us. So I would just recommend that you just kind of experiment and play around with it yourself.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody is listening to this podcast and they're thinking they want to take a more significant next step to learn about the way that you work with women, or you may not work with just women, but just with people in general, and they're feeling like this is something they want to be more cognizant and focused on as far as their own life and their own next steps, what would be a good way for them to connect with you or to get some more information about this?
Yeah. So if you're listening to this before April 26th, then I'm actually hosting an online summit where we're going to have 2 weeks of fun, where I'm going to give a lesson a day for 10 of those days. And then we're going to have expert speakers come on and also talk with us about a variety of different things. And this is a little bit beyond just alcohol. It can be any sort of security blanket that we may have, like overeating, or maybe it's overspending or over scrolling, even procrastination. So we're going to have some experts talking to us about tips and tricks. We'll also have somebody talk with us about how to get into that parasympathetic. So looking at the stress responses and really talking to us about how we can change into the red zone and get into the green zone easily throughout the day. And so basically it's going to be around an attention experiment. So we're just going to pay attention to the way that maybe alcohol or something else is showing up in our lives, and have fun with it, and be open to potentially shifting and changing to make our lives better.
I love it. And it's something that I feel like I always laugh thinking about my own life. Like, as much progress as I feel like I've made in personal development and as much time as I spend on that kind of stuff, it's like when you start to actually pay attention, you're like, oh man, there's still things that I do. And they're just like, I'd say borderline unconscious, because obviously I'm consciously aware that I'm doing it, but it's like, it's just amazing to see like how quickly you can fall back into things like the scrolling as an example. Like I took Instagram off my phone for a couple months, and honestly, I would have been happier to keep it off. But from a business perspective, it's kind of like they tend to punish you if you're not using the app to post stuff, which is like not the best. But I just noticed like not having that for a few months, just the difference in my like even my mental state or my mood and that kind of thing. And so I've noticed as I've been using it more to run my business again, it's like, oh, it's starting to creep back where it's like I'm starting to scroll more. So just having that awareness, I feel like, is so important, and taking it from a non-judgmental perspective and really just thinking like, hey, I'm not a bad person for scrolling Instagram, but is this how I want to spend my life? Because we really do have to make those kind of decisions. Unfortunately, these days, like society is just kind of putting a lot of pressure on us to do certain things that I don't think are really things we're going to be happy that we did in, 50 years from now.
Yeah. It's just all about paying attention to the little things that we're doing that are on a subconscious level, and that we might not, we're not aware of or sort of aware of, and then how we can just slowly integrate or change the way that we do this in our lives.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Camille, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise with our audience. If they want to connect with you further, we'll make sure that they have the link for that summit. Where else can they connect with you online?
Yeah, so Think Beyond the Drink. So that's my Instagram handle. Then Think Beyond the Drink, the Sober Curious Facebook group, and and then thinkbeyondthedrink.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we link to all of that in the show notes. You guys can connect with Camille and learn more about her methodology for helping women. And I keep saying women. Is it just people in general, or do you focus on women? I
focus on that high achieving social overdrinker woman.
Cool. So if you're someone who you feel like you align with that audience and you want to just learn how to have a better relationship with alcohol and maybe even get rid of alcohol if it's not something that should be in your life, then you can find more about the work that Camille's doing in those links.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Camille, for hanging out with us for the last 45 minutes or so. And to everyone that's listening, I hope that this was valuable. And again, it's giving me something to think about for sure with my own habits. So if you want to let me know or let Camille know how this episode impacted you, feel free to reach out on Instagram. All right. Well, we're so excited to have you here, and we'll see you next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. Thank you so much for listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Your time is your most precious resource, and I'm so grateful that you choose to spend some of it with me. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast and want to continue supporting my work on this show, I would very much appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes. By leaving a 5-star review, you'll help others find the show and help me spread my message to a larger audience. You can go to fedandfearless.com/review to find a button that'll take you right to iTunes to leave your review. And I have a special gift for you as a thank you for helping me share the podcast. Once you leave your review, send a screenshot of the review to hello@lauraschoenfeldrd.com. Or you can DM it to me on Instagram @lauraschoenfeldrd. Once you do, I'll share a free copy of my Overcoming Undereating ebook. Then share a favorite podcast episode in your Instagram stories and tag me @lauraschoenfeldrd. And I'll also give you a free copy of my 14-day calorie challenge recipe guide. Together, these bonuses are worth $44 and will help you become Fed and Fearless. And you'll get them absolutely free for just helping me grow the podcast. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next week for the latest episode.